traversing the strange world with peace and toodles.
All right, today on Traversing the Strange World with Peace and Toodles, we're joined by someone whose work really bridges the gap between reason and wonder. Britt Hartley, the mind behind No Nonsense Spirituality, both the YouTube channel and the book. Britt has built a fascinating space for those who are exploring spirituality outside of traditional religious frameworks, people who may not believe in a literal God, yet still feel a deep sense of meaning and awe and connection to the mystery of existence. Her approach is both grounded and expansive, mixing philosophy, personal experience, and genuine curiosity in a way that really resonates with speakers on the modern spiritual path, and me as well. Welcome to the show, Britt.
Happy to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about, you wrote a book, No Nonsense Spirituality. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can't really quite tell the story of the book without doing my own story. So I'll do my just a minute or two of my life story and then kind of how the book came to be, and then we can go wherever you want to go with that. But I was raised Mormon, and I had a lovely Mormon childhood in a religious community. By the time I was a teenager, I was asking questions and, starting to get shut down or bad answers to those questions. And that came out in me. I wish I had the language to be able to say, "Hi, Mom and Dad, I'm experiencing cognitive dissonance. Is there any better resources for how to?"
I wish all kids had the ability
you know what I
to
mean?
do that.
I wish I could have said things like that and gotten resources that could have helped me. But all it came out is, it just came out in just punk rock and kind of rebelliousness. And I ended up, having a boyfriend and then getting kicked out of my home when I was 16. And it was very difficult for me at the time. I ended up at my uncle's house, and to his credit, he had an amazing gospel library. And I found, C.S. Lewis and just some basic Christian writers and thinkers and theologians who were doing Christianity differently than how it was explained to me, as a child. There was a little bit more meat to it than I thought. So I was able to kind of reconcile a lot of my faith, and but still was just really interested in these questions about God and religion. And I guess then by the time I was 18, you could call me a nuanced Christian. It's I don't do that kind of Christianity, but there is something still really interesting about some of the depths of Christian apologetics. So I did that for a while and then ended up going to Christian theology school. I have a master's degree in theology. And people don't realize that Christian theology schools and, divinity programs and things like that, these are just atheist pumping machines. And so I lost.
One wouldn't assume that right off the bat.
I know it's you wouldn't assume that, but the people who know about or have been to theology school, it is an atheist pumping machine. And I not only lost my faith in Christianity and Mormonism and Christianity and religion, and then I also lost my faith in God. And so by the time it was time for me to write my dissertation, because I'm at all but dissertation in a PhD in theology, I realized in that moment that I didn't have anything to write about because I had lost my faith in God. And for
I remember
me,
you saying that in your book.
Yeah, and for me, just similarities in our stories. For some people, that's a really freeing moment, and they're just off and running, and life is great. For me, it wasn't that. It was a lot of grief. It was a lot of depression. It was some nihilism. It was I don't know what morality means. I don't know what meaning or purpose my life has. I don't know why I'm here. All of this seems stupid now. Oh, there's so much suffering. There's no ultimate justice. There's no ultimate truth. There's no ultimate narrative. And my brain kind of really shut down in that moment. And as I started to kind of piece my life together, which was a combination of philosophy and spirituality and mental health work and even psilocybin, which we talked about off air, I started to be able to kind of rebuild. And so this book is essentially a book about how to rebuild all the positive things that comes with religion and spirituality, and the people who say like there's nothing, it's all bullshit, like that's just not science. Like we have science that shows that religious people, they live longer, for example, or they fared better during COVID, or they struggle less with severe depression. And just because you have a community and you have rituals, you have help raising children, you have access to wisdom, you have contemplation, you have love and community, and just lots of like there's just lots of resources. Even as an atheist now, I have to admit that like
Support groups.
yeah, and religion's a cognitive technology. It does a lot of things for you. And so
Offers a sense of belonging.
yes, it's doing a lot of things, a lot more than we realize. It's not just like, oh, is your religion true or false? As Elaine de Botton says, he's an atheist philosopher who's living today, and he has this book called Religion for Atheists. But he talks about this idea that whether a religion is true or not is almost the most boring aspect you could ask of religion. The real question was, what was it doing for humans for all this time? And we're realizing it was doing a lot more than we thought. So this book is essentially, what are the aspects of religion that religion was doing that was helpful for humanity? What's the science behind it? And how do you get that tool in your life if you are either not sure of your beliefs, or you don't have any beliefs, or like, people like me who come from, high demand religions, I have like an allergy to truth claims. Like if someone's making a truth claim, like I bristle at that.
In a lot of ways,
Yes.
that since leaving religion, that has kind of kept me from wanting to join a group of really any like ideology, because it's the confirmation bias. I feel like at that point you become like biased to what the truth is, and that's just
Yeah,
kind of
and I
my
do think there's sometimes ways to work with that. So I sometimes will meet with a client who has that allergy to groups and truth claims, but then it almost becomes like it's like your religion can control you when you're in it, but it can also control you if it won't let you walk into spaces because of the trauma that you have. That's still orienting around that religion, right? And
for
I
sure.
want my clients to be more. So when I talk about clients, I'm talking about an 18-month program I did in spiritual direction after my master's degree. But this, sometimes I'll help them essentially like be able to build up the self-confidence to be able to say, okay, like that little part of me that's showing up that's feeling triggered, that's just a part of me that's scared and wants me to be safe. I hear you. I got you. I'm never going to take you into a place where where I have to quiet you again. And then
And
you
it's
can like
just
walk
like
in those spaces again.
it's just like somebody who left an abusive relationship. They project that person onto every person,
Yes.
even if that person
Yes.
did nothing. Even if like Sufi in no way resembles like Mormonism, you still might feel the hesitation and the fear that.
And I did. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
did. So I have a Sufi teacher who I'm very open about my atheism with, who I still work with from time to time. But yeah, it was difficult at first, but it was really healing to kind of go back into relationship. And it was almost really healing of a lot of my patriarchy wounds to see like what real relationships look like that are really not about any kind of control. And that was actually really healing. And if the church would have taken that from me because I'd be so scared to like trust in, another person again, then it's almost like it would be still taking things from me. And I don't want it to take anything from me. I want to have the freedom to go in and out of religion for whatever tools are there, as much or as little as I want. And that feels a lot more freeing than like, I'm never going to touch this space again.
All right. So yeah, a term you're using, spiritual atheist, that to some people might seem like a contradiction. Not to me, but to some people it might. So how do you personally define spiritual atheism, and what led to that phrase in particular?
Yeah, so what I mean by spiritual, because it's really hard to define spiritual because there's so many religions that are non-theistic, that don't have a God. And so how do you come up with one definition for spirituality? And the best one that kind of the field of religious studies comes up with is that spirituality is just connection to inside of you. For some people, that's a soul. For some people, that's like just your inner psyche. just the universe inside you, and then connection to outside of you. And for some, again, that includes a higher power or the supernatural. For me, it doesn't. So spirituality really at root level is about connection. And then as an atheist, all that means is, atheism doesn't mean I know for sure there is no God. Atheism is a negation. All it says is I'm not convinced of the God of theism. And so for me, it's like I don't know what reality is, but I just am wary of religious claims and bullshit of all kinds and flavors, but there's still something here. There's something here in spirituality. There's something here that's been housed in the houses of religion. There's some wisdom here. There's some tools here that I think are still applicable and helpful even for secular people. And I want to be able to claim those things. So I call myself a spiritual atheist because I really want to claim that spirituality piece, but I also really want to highlight that I'm still very highly skeptical, and I don't make any claims about what ultimate reality is. I've never claimed to be a panpsychist or an idealist or a materialist. My answer is I don't know, but what are some tools that help me to build the good life in light of me not knowing what the hell is going on with reality? And so saying I'm a spiritual atheist almost gives me it just gives me an opening with people so that I can explain that a little bit, because it's really hard to say it's these good things, but not these things. And that title just at least usually gives me, a follow-up question so that I can explain myself.
Another potentially good definition for it. Totally awesome punk rock version of spirituality.
My 16-year-old punk rock heart, still resonates with a lot of that.
Hell yeah. Okay, so, and something for me, my I guess you would call it secular spirituality. I would say much of it, the premise of it is maximizing my well-being and the well-being of other people. And part of that, I believe, is knowing thyself. So doing the work of, sometimes that involves going to therapy. Sometimes it involves mindfulness meditation. But I think that's a good framework for spirituality, is to maximize your well-being and the well-being of other people. And a huge part of doing both those things is understanding yourself and understanding other people.
Yeah, those were three really big ideas that I use just almost every day in my coaching, which is people will ask in nihilism, how do you rebuild? We don't know anything about anything. There's no God. Nobody's coming to save us. What do you build? What's a possible foundation that you could build on in the void? And you really spoke to it well, that if you can build on the fact that no matter what's going on with reality, there's an experiential quality of life. And, Sam Harris talks about this, that there's a quality of experience, that there is a difference between putting your hand on a hot stove and watching your favorite movie. There's a different quality of experience to those two things.
Absolutely.
Which means that all we need as our basis foundation here is that we are experiencing creatures, and that we can suffer or, thrive based on how we do life. And then that gives us a foundation that we can build on, that no matter what is actually true about the universe, I seem to be an experiencing meat suit. And what is the kind of life that would make this meat suit thrive for as long that I'm going to be alive? Yeah. And the way that we do that is exactly what you said, which is you have to know yourself. You have to know what your core values are, what lights you up inside, what is inherently meaningful to you, what are the projects that are engaging to be a part of, even if it's ultimately meaningless, even if this world blows up and nobody knows that we were here, what's still kind of engaging for the process of it. And when you can narrow down and really intentionally build your life from that kind of self-knowledge and this kind of radical freedom, that can be when nihilism can turn into such a treasure, because it forces you to be honest about what a life worth living looks like for you. And it kind of gives you some existential courage to create that life, even though it may look different than other people. But if you've already looked into the void, if you've already faced death, if you've already faced meaningless and gone down some of these rabbit holes, it can almost give you the existential courage to do something that people would consider cringe, or do your life differently because you're really focused on this life that's worth experiencing for you. And that shift that you just kind of alluded to was really the thing that got me going and saved my life and helped take me from suicidality to like thriving post-nihilism.
That was a huge part of when I left religion, is the like suicidal tendencies, the nihilism and the depression that I believe at its very worst leads to that. I felt like a rat running through a maze every day, just going from point A to point B, just like start day, repeat process constantly over and over.
Yeah. For me, it felt like a video game that I would get up and I would put on clothes to play this character in this video game. And I was only doing it because other characters in the game cared about my character. And I would just walk around and pretend to be human and play my little part because I have people that care about me. And I was probably in that space for about 2 years where it was like, I am barely hanging on here. I'm completely dissociated. I don't see any moral reason to continue this project of life. And so it was really dark and really difficult.
So what made you fall in love with the experience of being again?
Yeah, the moment that started it for me, and this sounds like really trite but I'd have to be honest of what that looked like, is I have children. I have adopted children, and my oldest son, it was just this moment where he was getting off the bus and he looked for my face. And then when he sees my face, he's very young. He lights up, he runs, he gives you, the big bear hug. And it's just so precious, right? And even for how shut down my brain was and how dissociated I was and how I was really disconnected to my body. So this was all happening in my head. A lot of like analytics of like, can I justify life? And like almost like doing abstract mathematics on whether life's worth living or not. Completely disconnected to my body. But in the moments with my son, it was like my body was screaming at me, I don't care that the universe doesn't care about this child. I care about this child. Like my body's screaming at me that moment when my son's face lit up because he saw me and he gives me a big hug, that it's meaningful. And my rational brain didn't have a sense of how to make sense of that. Like I didn't really have philosophical arguments for that, but my body was saying there's something here worth experiencing. And maybe then there's something here that my rational brain doesn't appreciate or doesn't understand. And that's when I started to really open up to ideas of, okay, what are ways to improve from more of a body place my experience of being alive, since I don't want to end my life. I'm looking for reasons not to, essentially. Let me give this a try. And that's when I just really started to try to re-engage with the world and read things of philosophers and people who have been there before. I tried psychedelics that really helped to like reset my nervous system and help me grieve and help me to be able to think in new perspectives again. And I started to really dig into existential philosophy, which kind of begins in nihilism. It begins in the void and has, responses to that. And then I started to take, big radical risks into authenticity, that if I'm already suffering and I'm already want to die, what am I holding on to? Why don't I just try to do the most what's the most radical thing that I could do with my life that would make me happier at the level of experience, with like no thought of like, what will people say, or what will people say about me, or like, what will this do to my ego, or I'll probably fail. I'm already suffering. I may as well try. And so, yeah, it really started with the body and getting my body back engaged with life. And when that happened, I started to get better tools, and then eventually, better existential philosophy so that my mind could get back on board. And then life just got better. But if you're trying to do life just from a place of abstract mathematics disconnected from your body. I feel like that's the most irrational thing that some philosophers and atheists do, which is try to explain life without that concept of like we're experiencing things. We are not rational beings. We are emotional beings. We are experiencing beings. And so to try to solve the problem of life from a purely rational place is actually a really irrational thing to do. And usually comes from our emotions just because we're suffering, right? And then we find philosophies that validate us in our suffering. So for me, it was a lot of getting back into my body, and that helped me to kind of start building from there.
That really is at the heart of it. Like, it's what we search for. We search for validation, like whole, like corrupt politicians can run their whole campaign off from simply like validating people, and rather that be their resentment, their hurt, their pain, their
fear.
suffering. We deeply want to be validated. We want to have a sense of belonging. For me, something for me, you're talking about feeling grounded in the body. And I think for me, in a lot of ways, it was lifting weights and running. When I was going through my depression and my nihilism, there'd be times where I heard on a podcast that like, if you can face something physically hard, it'll give you more mental resilience. And I was thinking, that's really what I need right now. So I'd be running for miles, and I'd just be out there thinking with my thoughts. But what it was doing, both lifting and running, was making me feel connected to my body. And it was making me appreciate my body and the experience that I was having through it.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
And just like with you, psychedelics, that did play a role. I don't see them as like this magical end all be all to like the human experience, but I think for me, what it really did was a lot of things that I was repressing. Maybe I shoved it all down into the basement of my mind. Well, somebody turned the water on down there, and it all started floating up to the top, and I hadn't cried in years. I hadn't cried in almost 10 years. Damn it.
Yeah.
And then I started crying again. When I was a kid, I was very like imaginative, and I'd be creating like these fictional characters, and I had all kinds of things that I wanted to do. And in a lot of ways, like after I had that psychedelic experience, these different things that I had repressed, I was like, oh, that's stupid. It wouldn't go anywhere. Like starting a podcast, it was at the front of my mind, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it was like this gut feeling of do that. And I think another part of my secular spirituality is and this probably isn't something I would say I have a good grasp on, but I think another part of it is like discerning the senses. What is the body saying to you, and what's the unconscious saying to you?
Yes. That's a big part of it. Yeah. So for me, some people are thrown into the void through psychedelics. For me, philosophy broke open all those, views of reality and free will and the illusion of the self. I had already gone through all of that just through ideas, just through philosophy. So psychedelics for me was not part of my deconstruction, but it was part of my reconstruction. And like you said, I don't think that it's a magic pill, but what it can do is just open a door of just like, I got to just cry out what I've been mourning, but just have repressed and just put, compartmentalized. And that can just, help you to move forward, or it can just help open the door, especially if you have anhedonia and you've had depression for a long time and you've forgotten what your feelings feel like. You've been shut off of your feelings. For me, like I get really dissociated when I get depression.
Same.
And it just like reset my nervous system so I could feel again. And then also just it reminded me of what I was like as a kid, where it was less about like the neurotic ticker tape of my brain. And it was more just like curiosity in all directions. And it was really playful. And I had forgotten that place because it'd been so long since I'd been there. And with depression, you don't remember, being in those places. And so it can just open that door to show you that a different way of being in the world is possible. And then ideally, what I recommend to people is you use it to open a door so that you know that it's there, but then try to find ways that you can walk into that room with your sober mind so that you don't become dependent on having to be in an altered state of consciousness just to be able to function, right? Because then
I agree.
Then it becomes chasing the next psychedelic high or chasing the next drug combination or chasing the next, or I've seen clients who like their life is over here and it's like just really stupid and meaningless and they hate it. But every 6 months they do like a big ayahuasca trip in Costa Rica. And those are almost like two separate lives because they haven't integrated. So I really believe like if you're going to go down that path of psychedelics, which was really helpful for me, especially on the depression side of things, to just make sure that you have either a guide or a sitter or some way to do integration so that you can learn how to walk through that door with your sober mind rather than being dependent, on the drugs to be able to get you there. So I used to use it maybe every 6 months. And that was, especially the first few trips were really meaningful and impactful. And like you, I felt like I cried out just like years of mourning. But now it's like it's been over a year for me and I don't really feel the call for it. And
Same.
and so like I have longer gaps of time now where
The
I'll
last
go.
few times that I had done it, they were microdoses. And even then, I feel like I won't say what I was supposed to receive from it, but I felt like what I was gonna. It's like, this is good. Just take it and go with it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think what if I could, like, in a metaphor, summarize my takeaways from the psychedelic experience and what it's done, I feel like there's different repressed things that I like discussing spirituality, the Bible, religion. I felt like that was just dumb stuff. No use talking about it. So even though I had years of studying the Bible and thoughts and opinions on religion outside of that, I just repressed it. And so much of it, I repressed my emotions, my desire for creativity, my imagination. And so all those repressed things in a lot of ways I associate with my inner neglected child. And so now where I see myself in life, I'm climbing up a mountain, but I got a little child on my back and he's, we're talking, he's pointing out, I'm asking him what he needs to be happy and, where we need to go. And this podcast, happens to be one of them.
I love that. And podcasting is very much how I play too. Because some people will be like, if you don't believe in anything, why do you spend so much time talking about gods and religions? And as an atheist, I spend almost all of my day talking about gods and religions and beliefs. I'm fascinated by it. And people ask me like, why
And I like that word that you used, play.
Yeah, why do you do this? And I'm like, this is actually how my inner child is playing. Like you and me right now is very much like my 8-year-old self and your 8-year-old self, like building a sandcastle in the sand where we're just in the experience. It doesn't matter if nobody sees it or nobody listens to it or whatever, because like we're just in the experience and this is how we play. And that was just a huge shift for me because for a while in my nihilism, I stopped reading books because I was just like, nobody knows shit about fuck. Like I just cannot read another book from another goddamn man telling me what the universe is. I've read thousands of them. I can't do this anymore. And I just, for a while, I stopped reading books and it was really painful for my identity because like, what do you do if your identity is being a truth seeker and there's no truth? I don't even know if we're interacting with reality.
I feel
or
like
truth.
that was a huge thing for me.
It totally shut me down. And the thing that brought it back to life was what you're saying is this element of play of like, oh, actually, if I connect to my inner child, and that inner child did come out in my mushroom trips. It came out in my first one. it like in my first trip, I asked my guide, I was like just like playing with the gaps in my brain. Like I was trying to figure out like, can I still spell? Like give me a word and I'll try to spell it. And like ask me a question, ask me like what's in the Declaration of Independence. And anyway, I was just like playing like with what my brain could do or couldn't do. And I realized that like playing with ideas, reading books, podcasting, things like this is actually how I play. And it's not about me trying to find some truth to build my life on. I may never find out what the hell is going on with reality and then I'll die, but I'm at least like right now we're building sandcastles. And that makes it, it just makes life so much better when I shifted from truth seeking to find truth to build my life on to truth seeking as play. And that was just absolute transformative for me.
I like that. There's this idea in Hinduism. I'm probably totally going to botch it, but I think it's said that the highest form of reality is Maya, which is a god performing a dance or performing a drama. And so everything happening right now, me, you, everything is just a god playing. And I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. I don't know if it's true or not, but
yeah, no, it's something that happens with all mystic paths and mystic teachers that they'll talk about. Like Jesus will say, like, become like a little child. Buddha will say, like, beginner's mind, or this concept of dance, or, in Sufism, there's the whirling dervish where you're actually kind of spinning. And with one hand, you're kind of like receiving, and with one hand, you're kind of like laying seeds. And so this concept of dance, of finding a way to just dance in the experience of the mystery of life, is something that shows up in every religious mystical path. And anytime that like all the religions, like whatever the mystic branch is kind of like saying similar things, that's always when I like pay attention, because it means that there's something really deeply human going on here that is deeper than just the differences between these religions theologically. And you got to change your smoke alarm battery.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have you tuned it out? Like you don't even notice it anymore?
I don't.
Yeah, that's funny.
So that leads to my next question, actually. Would you say spiritual atheism is a bridge between skepticism and mysticism?
Yeah, I definitely would say so. So like my favorite books in this space are ones that like hold on to mysticism and skepticism. So I like, Alain de Botton and his book Religion for Atheists. I like Spiritual Atheist by Nick Jenkel. I liked Rational Mysticism. There's just any book in that space where it's like there's a baby in this bathwater. There is for sure bathwater. Like throw that shit out. Yep. But there is a baby here. Any book that's exploring that space, I do think is what we need more of on the secular side of things. Like there's things that religion needs to do to improve. And I talk about those things, but there's also ways that secularism still is falling short in providing people with tools and resources to be able to build the good life outside of a religion that's going to kind of provide all that for them. So I think there's work to be done on both sides.
Right on. When you let go of the traditional concept of God, did you lose something or did something new emerge in its place? I feel like we kind of already touched on that.
Yeah, there are some people who will critique me on social media whenever I say I lost my faith, because they'll say, you didn't lose your faith. You gained knowledge. You gained experience. You gained insight, whatever. And while I can say now that that loss led to was worth it for me. Like it was worth it going through those 2 years of nihilism, because it forced honesty towards this authentic life worth living. But in the reason that I still say I lost my faith is because I want to be true to what that experience was for me. It was not freedom. My life is great. It really was collapse. I had lost, when God died for me, there was like 15 anchors psychological anchors and social anchors and identity anchors that died with God. And, you know, when your dad dies or something like that, you have a funeral and you have rituals and you have a period of mourning and your friends reach out to you. We have ways to support that. But when God died, I had no way to process what the hell was happening to me and why my brain was shutting down. So for me, I still use the language of, you know, I lost my faith because I want to be true to what that experience was. It was really devastating for me. But I do think that the life that I've rebuilt is better than, you know, the best years of my life when, you know, I was doing either Christian apologetics or was in Mormonism or whatever. Like a life that you truly build from awareness, you know, and with radical freedom towards a life that's worth experiencing. Like it's just my relationships are deeper, my work is more meaningful, my life is just infused with what I want to what I want to be spending my life doing. It's just like to me now, there's nothing that I lost in the death of God that I didn't rebuild better. But at the time, I didn't know that that was possible. All I knew was that I was just falling.
And I like that, you know, because a lot of spiritualities, they offer this mirage that everything's awesome, your life is perfect.
Yeah.
To where I like that it's admitting the realism of it, that the experience of it is that part of it's just like going to therapy. Part of deconstruction, you're analyzing the parts that are you want to and you don't want to. And
yeah, for me, yeah, it was a painful experience, but it led towards that really deep honesty. What are the sandcastles that are worth building for me just for the experience of it? And that doesn't mean like some people will say like, oh, well, that's just privilege, right? Because some people will have that response that if you have this kind of radical freedom to build a life according to your core values, then you just have a lot more money and privilege than everyone else, and blah blah blah. But what we find is actually the opposite. That choosing to live according to your own core values, no matter what's going on in the world, is a philosophy that helped people survive concentration camps and helped people survive, James Stockton. There's a James Stockton paradox where, you know, he's a prisoner of war. And when we see Viktor Frankl and he's talking about these same concepts in a concentration camp, and he kind of challenged the people in the room that like if humor is your core value, then like make a goal that every day, no matter what we're doing, you know, this is a labor camp, you may die, but every day choose to make someone laugh, because that is actually living according to your own core values. And for some people it was kindness, and for some people it was other things. And the people who actually really did decide, I'm going to choose how I respond to this absurd situation that I find myself in, even though there's a lot of suffering and all of that, I'm going to choose how I respond to that according to the values that are inherently resonant with me, which makes me happier when I live according to them and makes the world better. And even in concentration camps, they were more likely to survive. And when they did survive, and if they were rescued, they were more likely to have like low levels of PTSD. Like they just had such incredible resilience, even for like, and so what I tell people is like, yes, we can talk about privilege, but at the end of the day, this is a way of life that you can commit to no matter what the hell is going on with the world. And no matter how much your life sucks or how much you think you're limited, your life does not concentration camp suck. And your life is not concentration camp limited. And they were able to do what we're talking about there. And so I don't think it's just privilege when I talk about radical freedom. I really mean like, even in a concentration camp, I'm going to choose to make people laugh today. That's still radical freedom. That's still claiming the part of you that's human, even when everything else has been stripped for you. So for me, it's just given me incredible resilience when times are good, and also when times are hard. Like I'm a human. I have hard times and tragic things that happen to me and my family. My daughter had a traumatic brain injury 2 years ago, and that was, like I'm still in it. Like I'm not just like on the beach sipping margaritas saying like, oh, what an enjoyable experience. No, I'm talking about about this still works even when shit hits the fan. And I think that's important to say. Otherwise, people feel like this is only a way of life that's accessible through privilege. And I don't think so.
And we see that in like the idea of like taking, like Paul said, take every thought captive. Like that's one of the good things that we see in many different religions, whether it be Christianity, Buddhism, the action of being intentional about, like, we can gather a skill of doing this from like mindfulness meditation, taking every thought captive, noticing what thoughts distract us, what pulls us away. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it also reminds me, the way you were speaking there, it reminds me of Leo Tolstoy, because by the time he had his nihilistic crisis, he was already like, he had already published War and Peace. He had already published Anna Karenina, and he had an estate, he had children, he had a wife, he had friends, he had money, he had everything. He's 50 years old. He's already considered, the greatest author of his generation. And for a period of 4 years, he couldn't have guns or ropes in his house because he was afraid that he would kill himself. And he was really nihilistic, and he wrote about it, and it was ugly. For him, it was more like a midlife existential crisis. And then he looked out at the Russian peasants that were working on his estate, and how they had so much less than him and they were happy. And he did this radical change of his life where he really started to live a deeply spiritual life. He gave his money away. He would wear simple clothing. He built a school for the Russian peasants to teach the illiterate kids how to read. He started to eat vegetarian because he really believed in nonviolence. And he drastically changed his life so that he had a purpose-driven, very spiritual. He didn't go back to the church. He was still very critical of Christianity, but there was something in Jesus as a mystic that he still really loved, a life of simplicity and love and service and compassion. And he really changed his life to the point that his family was getting really upset because he was essentially giving his estate away. There's this guy, and now he's wearing like very simple clothing and eating vegetarian meals and hanging out with the peasants. But it's what saved him in his nihilism, that aspect of spirituality. And for him, it was Jesus. But Jesus, again, like it's like the baby in the bathwater Jesus, like the parables of Jesus, not the God that we made out of Jesus, not the nationalism and all of that came with Jesus.
Probably the more historically accurate Jesus who came to.
Yeah, that's what I see in Jesus, like the homeless, mystic, radical.
Yes.
But it's hard to say because Jesus didn't write anything down, and nobody who knew Jesus wrote anything down, which people are always surprised. Yeah, which is always which always surprises people. Like, what do you mean? It's like, this is a game of telephone. Like, we'll never really know who Jesus was.
Do you think meaning and morality can be rooted in awe itself rather than divine command? That's my next question.
Meaning and morality. I think meaning and awe are related. Yeah, you could interrelate those things. But I still think rather than awe being the thing that you're grounding in, for both meaning and morality, you're building on that experience idea that we talked about, that if we can suffer and have the capacity for suffering, then the most suffering for the most conscious creatures is then therefore the most bad. The most thriving for the most conscious creatures is good. Any move that you make towards the good is what you could call morally good. And so that's probably, I think, a better grounding for morality. It's this horizontal kind of morality that we derive our morality because I know what it's like to suffer, and you seem to be a human like me, and so I don't want to cause that suffering to you. It's very simple. So we kind of build it on that base of experience. But yeah, definitely awe is a part of this, because awe will help you to break out of kind of your inner selfishness. And we know from studies of awe that it helps you to be a more generous person. Because it it will even like break grudges, and that's why we think it developed evolutionarily, is when we have these moments of awe, we can come back into community, and we can forgive each other, we can be more generous, we can be more compassionate, and also it's a way to experience meaning, because you're just really truly in experience, and it's something amazing just to be a thing that's experiencing at all, right? It's a lottery
Yes,
to
yes,
be
it is.
experienced at all. So I think those things are all interrelated. They kind of feed each other. But I would say that, yeah, morality, I think, is more based in this very simple golden rule idea because of the fact that we're experiencing creatures. I think you can build a moral system from that.
Reciprocity.
Yeah. Yeah. Just I know what it's like to suffer, and you seem to be human, so I'm not gonna do that to you. And not just out of pure altruism, but because like my life is better. Like even if I just wanted to be selfish, some people ask me like, well, if nothing matters, there's no God. Like why don't you just be selfish all the time and screw people over and steal and do whatever the hell you want and whatever. And it's like because we also know like there's no data in the science of well-being that says that that way of life is going to make inner happiness for me. And so I'm even at a place where like if I could screw over somebody but get millions of dollars and be able to build myself a mansion, I wouldn't do it. Even if I know that I wouldn't get caught, and even if I know I wouldn't go to jail, and I knew there was no God. And there's a lot of people that say like, oh, if there was no consequences, like I would do it. And for me, I've learned now that I know better now, that if I were to do that, I would sit in that mansion and I'd have such a lack of inner peace and
Your conscience is too loud.
such a split psyche that I'd have to distract myself in that mansion. I'd have to, like, I would not be able to sit in a room with myself and be at peace the way that I can now. So even if I was just purely selfish, I would still be a good person because it makes your life better. My relationships are better. I have lower anxiety. I'm not tracking any lies. I'm not trying to hide what I'm doing over here from my sense of self over here. It's just like I can just really be. And that kind of inner peace is even if I was just selfish, I would still be nice to people and still live a moral life, even if it was just for me, because my life's a lot better that way.
It just makes the human experience more enjoyable.
It
To
really
be loving
does.
and to like, do something, say something that brings somebody a smile rather than
Yeah.
an angry or offended face.
Yeah, it's so lovely, and it just will make you happier. In fact, we have studies that show that if you get a gift certificate to like get a pedicure or something like that, if you give it to someone, you actually get a longer boost of like happy chemicals in your brain than if you were to
Serotonin.
actually, yeah, if you were to just actually go and get the pedicure yourself. So even from the point of view of selfishness, like you can still make an argument that it is way better for you to live a moral life.
I think Sam Harris in his little book Lying, he talks about how lies require maintenance. If I lie to
Yeah.
you, I have to always remember what I said, and I have to maintain that to where when you tell the truth, it gives you the mental freedom of never having to
Yeah.
remember what you said.
It's so freeing. It's such a freeing way of life. And also just like when I'm wrong, I just say sorry. And I just like it's not a, like I'm really sorry. You know what I mean? Like that's a great thing about having an ego death is like, yeah, I fucked up. I am so
Yeah.
sorry. And it just makes it, yeah, you're just walking the world with, I just have such less anxiety. I'm not tracking how my ego looks. I'm not tracking any of that. I'm just trying to show up moment to moment in the best way I can. And also
Plus,
vulnerably, like in my full humanity. And that's so freeing. I would never trade a mansion for that.
it's a peaceful thing to not to feel the need to defend a false reality.
Yes. Yeah, I don't have to defend any actions. I don't have to
Yeah.
defend any belief. I just get to experience and connect and learn and grow and watch myself grow. And
And
yeah,
sometimes that false
so
reality
great.
is an idea of myself,
Yes.
that I have to let go of because, like, why fight against reality when I can be in alignment with it and do something about it? If I there's something about self that I'm denying or avoiding, I'm only defending that false reality, and I'm creating for myself a place I
Yeah.
can't get out of.
Yeah, and
need
that's its own prison. You know, that's its own matrix, and that is a prison. And I'm not always this way. There are some times where, you know, I'm human. I'll dig my feet in. My ego will get involved, especially like, you know, with my husband where there's like stakes there or whatever. But at my best, it's actually exciting to be wrong at something because it means like I don't want to be wrong about something a second longer than I have to be, right? It's so exciting. I learned something
Yes.
new either about the world or about myself, and that's really exciting. And that is so much more freeing than like always having to, yeah, like the maintenance involved in playing your brain's little delusional games with itself. And I just have so much more inner peace and enjoyment just not having to just put on any fake face like in the world, and I just can just walk around the world freely, and there's nothing that I could buy with immorality that would be more valuable than that.
Very cool. So that kind of leads me to my next question, and this one's for my wife. And this is also gonna, in the time that we have left, merge us into talking a little bit about the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is the wife of God. So this is from my wife. Masculine slash feminine dynamics in spiritual growth. Not the exact, this is her notes, not the exact wording, but in your interview with Rhett from Rhett and Link, you guys were talking about how you've commented on how male spiritual journeys often involve shedding ego or something. Sorry, I didn't realize she had that in the notes or something.
It's okay.
You've commented on that. While women's journey may involve finding voice or reclaiming power, how do you see these dynamics playing out today? And how can both genders learn from each other in the process of spiritual maturation?
Yeah, so when we're talking about masculine and feminine spirituality, we are talking about this in a way I'm not talking about genitalia. So for example, queer people are much more likely to resonate however they are biologically. They're much more usually resonant with the female side of spirituality because they didn't get kind of the benefits of being a white straight man in their community or whatever. So when we talk about these things, I'm not talking about genitalia. We've just we've organized it in this way that these are kind of masculine traits or feminine traits. But basically what we're noticing is that when you live in a patriarchal society, which in America we are, whether or not you're in a patriarchal religion, you're still, it's still a patriarchal society. And in a patriarchal society,
things are certainly structured that way.
Yes, in a patriarchal society, men are much more likely to, in that society, build an ego, which is good. You should have one. Like you cannot be complete without one. And you have
Shouldn't dominate you though.
No, it shouldn't dominate you, but you can't have an ego death unless you have an ego. Like it's actually something you have to build first. And so men are much more likely to have the opportunity for leadership and personality development and just taking up space and walking into a room and believing that they have something to say and something to add. They're just much more likely in a patriarchy to develop that sense of ego. So spirituality for kind of the masculine is a lot about ego death and doing mushrooms and doing things that limit the ego, because a lot of what men need, especially what I see is like, there's a lot of in spirituality of like the CEO man who goes and does ayahuasca and now he's into spirituality and talking about ego death. There's a lot of that going on. And that is actually, that's great. That is very healthy for the men who have an overinflated sense of ego, and their spirituality is a lot more about, I need to give to others. I need to have an ego death. I need to reduce this overinflated sense of ego that I had the opportunity to build. Now, what happens with women and queer people in a patriarchy is that they don't get often the chance to build a healthy ego. Women are conditioned to coddle everyone and to kind of manage everybody else's emotions. And so what that means is for women, all of this talk, like I know so many women who have been damaged because they leave religion and they go find some meditation place and some guru, and the guru is just trying to get them to have an ego death because that was so transformative to him. But the woman is just not resonating with this. It's not happening. I don't really get it. I'm not moving forward. I keep trying to have this ego death. And it's the reason is, for one, she may not have a big enough ego to have an ego death because she's a people pleaser. She doesn't even know who she is. And secondly,
society doesn't really create that type of environment for a woman to, like men, like you said, like there can be things where our ego, if not kept in check, can be like, you know, we're God incarnate or whatever. But it's just really aren't given that environment.
Yeah, from very young. Yeah, from very young, we're told to smile. If we talk too much, we're told that we're bossy, that we're loud. Rather than boys, we would like, you know, commend them for their leadership or whatever it is. And so, yeah, what happens is they're trying to either kill an ego that they don't have, or what they should be doing for their spirituality is, in order, like what we're trying to get to is a place where you have a balanced ego, where an ego is a part of your psyche at the table, but you also have emotions, and you have your inner child, and you have your shadow, and you have your rationality, and you want everybody to have a seat at the table. That's that, and then you make kind of board meeting decisions with all these aspects of your psyche. And so
like
for women,
Congress, where all the Congress members are working together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you're trying to build within yourself. And so for women and queer people, or if you have like a narcissistic parent where you never got to develop as a human, then you don't need ego death. You actually need to ego build. And so there's so few spiritual voices in the space that talk about, you know what you should do to be more spiritual? Be more fucking selfish. Get loud. Take up space.
Your Mother Teresa.
Boundaries, right? Yeah. Like make a boundary. Tell someone like, anyway, like get bigger in a meeting. What male spiritual guru is talking about that? Nobody, because that's not their spiritual path. They need to quiet their ego, right? And so it's this weird thing where, because male voices still dominate spirituality even outside of religion, that so many women are trying to ego death their spirituality, when really they would be actually in a healthier place if they got a little bit more selfish, and if they got to develop as a person. Who am I? What do I like? And it's embarrassing for me that, as I'm 40 now, but I think I was probably 35 years old it was the first time that I had ordered pizza because I like this kind of pizza. I was 35 before I did that, because what we do as women is like, you know, I'm eldest daughter, so I'm managing my younger brothers, and then if I have roommates, we're kind of, oh, this is the, you know, common denominator, we'll get this pizza. And then as I became a mother, you know, all of my needs go away when you become a mother. And I adjusted to everyone else. And I was 35 years old before I said, I'm going to order a pizza with pepperoni and pineapple on it. And if you don't like the pineapple, you pick it off, because this is the first time, like, I love pepperoni and pineapple, and I'll usually like take a little bit of the Hawaiian, and I'll make my own little thing. But like, I never actually shown my family that like I have preferences too. I just never have voiced them because it was easier to just get really small and really quiet. And so much of what spirituality for women is growing a sense of self, and that's actually healthy, but men will still call it anti-spiritual, or they'll call it selfish. And it's like, no, we're just coming to that balance from different directions. And that can be hard for male guru types to understand if they don't understand this experience of women, and if they take for granted the opportunity that they had to build an ego and think that everybody else got that opportunity. Actually, not everybody else did.
So kind of how I picture it in my mind is like, with male spirituality, you have the ego surrounding this neglected, sad child, and the spiritual process is removing the ego that's keeping us from even accessing that child, right?
Yeah. And
But,
just being
but then with
human. Yeah.
yeah, but then with feminine spirituality, perhaps it's oriented in a way to where rather than prying away the ego that's a shell around it, you're using the ego as like to build her up in a platform to be able to be a healthy, recognized child.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. That my inner, like I have to do some claiming and some building of self to be able to say, this is what my inner child would make my inner child happy. And I'm going to prioritize that. Now, not all the time, but sometimes I'm going to prioritize not just what my children want, but what my inner child wants.
Yes.
And that can be a spiritual path. And I think there are times where that me talking about that, I may be for a woman like the first time that they've heard of something like that as spiritual. Usually we see that as something very selfish. And that's because, yeah, we're just seeing it still from the male lens.
Do you have time to talk about the wife of God a little bit?
Yeah, I can do a little here. And yeah, it's been a long time since I've been kind of in biblical scholar land. But do you want to talk about like Asherah?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's really interesting to watch Asherah as the consort of El in this kind of early Canaanite pantheon. And what people don't realize, and it's so frustrating, I'm sure you get frustrated with this sometimes too, or maybe you don't, but I'm guessing that you do, is that Christians will always talk about their God as if they've like this is the one true God that's always been the same,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like this is the God, right? As if God has always been anti-abortion or whatever. And what they don't realize is the God that they are claiming stays the same yesterday, today, and forever was just one God in a pantheon of Canaanite gods. You know, like just like the Greeks and the Egyptians, they had a pantheon.
Yahweh and El weren't even the same ones.
Yeah, and they weren't even the same ones. So El is at the top with his consort Asherah, and Yahweh is what we think is like a storm god. And maybe possibly also has something to do with war. So we have some, and we see in the Old Testament still we have a lot of
Absolutely.
war imagery, and we also have like a lot of storm imagery. We have
The constant emergence of Baal as a storm
yes,
and
yeah,
fertility deity. And he was and then the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal are an excellent case of that. You know,
yeah.
the
And so it's
fire
this,
comes down from heaven and consumes the sacrifice, and then there's this mighty
yes.
storm that King Ahab, he can't even get his
Or
chariot
even
wheels back to
yeah, or even just like the voice of God sounds like mighty thunder, or like or no, like there's some that's like the voice of 1,000 rivers, like we get some of that
yes,
imagery. So Yahweh is a storm god, but what happens in agriculture when the Jews start to settle is that the gods that you need in agriculture are war gods because you need to fight for prime land for agriculture, and storm gods because you need rain. So all of a sudden Yahweh, who's basically just like this little teeny god, in this god, I think there's like 40 or some gods. He becomes the most important to an agricultural society that is settling down because they need war to get prime lands and they need rain. And so then there's this weird thing that happens where El and Asherah are together, and then for a little bit Yahweh and Asherah are together, which is weird because like if that's a son of God or if that's like a lower deity, then it's like, El got moved out of the way and now like he is with the consort, which is kind of his mom. So there's like this weird period where actually Asherah is with Yahweh. And then we start to actually remove Asherah altogether as we really start to value what men do in agricultural societies, that we start to say this land is tilled by this man. Men have more upper body strength, so this land is tilled by this man, and these are the women and children that are on this land. And we start to get this kind of ownership of men kind of controlling the women and children and land that he's in charge of. And so now, because, gods always reflect society, then we kick out Asherah altogether because men become really valuable in this kind of agricultural society. Whereas before agriculture, women are the heart of the tribe and the goddesses
yeah.
are and there's pantheons on gods, but like the goddesses are not like Mary or like these very one-dimensional characters. These
Well, you have like the
goddesses.
shaman, which was typically a
Oh my
woman
gosh. Yeah.
too.
And the
Yeah.
goddesses before agriculture, they're strong. Like we have like Pele. She's like, she's a volcano, but she's also medicinal waters. And there's lots of language and there's lots of
Tiamat.
wisdom. Yeah. Like these pre-agricultural goddesses are just like badass, multi-dimensional characters. And we lose that with agriculture as men start to claim this is my land and this is my woman or women and these are my children and this is my name. And therefore, slowly over time we kick out Asherah altogether, which is very strange that like I don't think Christians raised in Christianity realize how weird it is that they want women to be nurturers and bear children, but then our God is male who is creating life without women altogether. And that's a very strange thing that happened in Christianity to have God completely
Well,
take over creation.
and aren't there verses in the Bible where, in like older, I think it was maybe more Ugaritic texts, like they were verses typically associated with a feminine god being like
Oh
the
yeah.
goddess of midwifery, or
Yeah.
being there to bring in the children, being nourishing
Yeah,
the
there's
people with their
whispers or
breasts,
like
and
yeah, or
yeah,
yeah, there's the breast one, and there's and like like the idea of God being like feeding like a woman, yeah, a woman's breast, and then there's also like God is like a hen who gathers her chickens under her wings.
yeah.
We still have some old imagery. We also have some accounts of wisdom that we think were originally kind of dedicated to Asherah, but got to stay because they kind of rebranded as wisdom. So there's this feminine aspect of wisdom, the word wisdom that will show up in the Bible. So there's whispers of her, but in patriarchy gaining power post agriculture, what that means for our God is that men are the center here, and we're the ones
Yeah.
in power here, and therefore we also it's gonna be the men who even take charge of creation itself. Even though there's all these whispers of the
Uh,
feminine in the Bible, those were almost entirely systematically removed. And I love the idea that there were women who would gather in these kind of like I don't know, they almost seem like witchy covens to worship
mhm,
Asherah, and they would do so
mhm.
secretly. And there's something just
Like
really badass about that I just really love.
I've heard references to like temple prostitutes. What was that?
Yeah,
Was such a Did such a thing even exist?
I don't know. I don't know enough about what the actual. I don't know enough about what the academic consensus is today on what that is, because sometimes when men look at women who are dancing in the forests, they assume that there's something sexual about it. Especially if like women are just like losing their clothing or whatever, which is not uncommon in worship.
Shamanistic
Yeah, and yeah,
practices, yeah.
to remove your clothing and just kind of be fully human and dance and these kind of things. And so sometimes men will call it sexual, and they'll call it, you're a witch and you're a seductress and you're doing these weird sex things. And then sometimes there was like an aspect of worshiping of the feminine through sex. And I don't know what the academic consensus is anymore
Yeah, even though we
on
do see
what that
multiple
is.
times in the Old Testament, we have King Saul. It mentions that
Mm.
they start playing the music and he gets naked and starts
Yeah,
praying
yeah.
and prophesying, and
So yeah,
likewise
so
with
when
King
men are
David.
talking about women going out in the forest and dancing naked, we don't quite know like did they
Yeah.
think this is more sexual than it was? And we don't have a lot of information either, so we're trying to piece it together as best we can. And the works of women are not written down, and if they are written down, they're certainly not preserved, and so we don't have accounts to be able to say, oh, here's a firsthand account of a woman who was there, and this is what they did. We have to kind of piece together the time period and the biases of
Yeah.
men, and it gets really fuzzy. So yeah, I'd be curious. I'm not sure what the academic consensus on that is.
All right. All right.
Probably last one here, and then I gotta hop off.
Yes, I'm trying to decide which one I would like to do for. Actually, I don't think we need to do any of those. I think my big takeaway from this is that rather it be the Israelite culture and the withdrawing of the feminine role, or the dominance of the masculine role over the culture, or our discussion about secular spirituality. I think a good takeaway for that is that everything we have today, whether it be our experience, who we are as a human, or the culture, the ideologies that we see before us, it's all snowball. And an important part of being a stranger in a strange land, navigating ourselves around the strange land, is dissecting those snowballs that history's thrown at us, or our family has thrown at us, our whole life, is dissecting that snowball. And I'd just like to know if you have any parting thoughts on that.
Yeah, I like this snowball analogy that you've made there, that the concepts that we think, before I did this, I was a history teacher. And so I'm well aware that like what happened in history almost becomes irrelevant compared to like what our memory of, or what our collective memory, or whatever we decided the story is. At this point, it wouldn't even really matter who Jesus was, because the snowball is so big around what we've created Jesus to be. And so I really do like that concept. And it gives us places to play. I think this is where we have to, for me, like as an atheist, I feel like this is a place where we step back, and rather than look at all these stories as truths, we do that more archetypal approach that you were talking about, I think off air, where there's something here that's human, that's interesting. Yeah. What was it about Jesus that was so captivating? It's so interesting with human nature, what we created to Jesus to be in America, and how in America, white Jesus and black Jesus are two totally different people, and Republican Jesus and Democrat Jesus are different people. And so it's when someone says, well, we'll never know who Jesus was, I'm like, I understand that. Like, we don't understand what's at the core of this, but what it still means for me is exploring our stories is one of the best ways for us to kind of explore what we are as humans, right? And that's where you kind of leave the history for a little bit. And not that the history doesn't matter. I do think that the history matters. But when we're talking about spiritual growth, I think it's so much more healthy to approach it as what is interesting and captivating about this story. What is the part of me that is that character? Because mystics read text as if they're all the characters. It's not like I'm Jesus and you're a Pharisee. It's I'm the Pharisee and I'm Jesus and I'm John the Baptist and I'm the prodigal son and I'm the father, right? And so this is how mystics really explore truth, is not just looking for historical accuracy, but also what about this story got humans to gather around campfires for thousands of years to tell the story. Now, that doesn't mean that the story is true. That's where you get Jordan Peterson, where it's like, because it's captivating, therefore it's true. I don't think we have to go that far, but we could at least...
no joke.
Yeah, that's right. What do you mean by all of that kind of stuff? I don't think we have to go that far. But
what do you mean by what? What do you mean by you? What do you mean by believe?
Yeah, because his thing is these stories are captivating because they're true. And when you ask him to really dig into that and explain it, it becomes, I think, more convoluted than we need to make this. I think we can definitely say, we don't have to say that Jesus died on a cross for our sins for us to appreciate exploring stories about Jesus, and what about this was captivating for humanity. What about these parables can I play with in my psyche? I still think that we can be critical and still find places to play in spiritual spaces. So that's all that I would add to that. But I love that analogy. I might use that in the future.
Wow. All right. Well, until next time, my fellow strangers, let's keep traversing this strange world with curiosity and inquisitiveness. And let's remember to be neighborly to folks, because at the end of the day, we're all just strangers in a strange land. And
love it.
Thank you so much for coming on today, Brittany.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. All right, see you next time, folks.
And make sure you switch out those smoke alarm batteries.
If you would like to contact us, email us at peaceandtoodles@gmail.com. Until next time, salutations, my fellow strangers.
What will they think of next?